Good morning. Uh, yeah, it's still morning here in Wichita, May the 6th. And we're beginning to experience a little bit of a reopening in Kansas, in Wichita, over in Hutchinson, where I live. But it will be somewhat slow and guided. Sometimes I wonder what early church congregations looked like. What were the house churches that Paul preached in, or that Peter celebrated the Eucharist in? Wonder what they looked like. Wonder how they were set up. You wonder how people gathered. I know way out in Milliken, Kansas, in the Diocese of Western Kansas, we have a house church called the Church of the Upper Room. And they do church in the living room each Sunday. They actually have an altar there that came out from another church. And so on Sunday mornings, people gather. There are chairs. We have a resident priest there, Mother Rita, and she does Eucharist, or she did for a long time till we came into this quarantine. And there used to be their normal Sunday morning session was that at 9 o'clock or thereabouts they did Bible study, and they would look at the scriptures for the lessons that day. Afterwards, they would do Eucharist. They would do communion service and celebrate the Holy Mysteries. And then after that, they would take down the chairs in the living room and set up some tables, and they would do a potluck lunch. Very early churchish, if my imagination serves me. So people come together for study. They come together for worship. They come together for fellowship. And the Church of the Upper Room in Lakin is not a big church, but it has a fairly consistent congregation, a number of people that show up there each week. And it's a really interesting group of people, a mixed bag of people who are there. And it's a wonderful community. I can't help but believe that some of the communities of the early church looked the same way, meeting in people's homes, sitting around in the living rooms, if you will, communing with potluck lunches, and there's some indication that the early services that Paul talked about where the Eucharist was sort of more like a potluck supper or more like a Seder meal or something like that, with the Eucharist was part of the integral part of the meal itself. That's changed over the years as we have grown and expanded, and the church has reached out in other places. And our congregations have gotten bigger than we could have in our homes. But I think we may be returning to something of that experience as we reopen our congregations here in the Diocese of Kansas. The bishop has said we can reopen, don't have to, but we can reopen on May the 24th, the last Sunday of the Easter season, the next Sunday being Pentecost. We can reopen under guidelines, and we'll be looking at the guidelines set by the state, which means that by the time we get to the 24th, we can have 30 people show up for a service, as long as they maintain the 6-foot social distancing, as long as we maintain good cleanliness habits of cleaning and disinfecting as much as we can as we go along. We're looking at ways of how services can be done. They will be smaller services. There will be spoken services. We're not going to have any sung music because I guess singing projects droplets further into the atmosphere and makes you a bit more contagious, although we'll have instrumental music. We don't know exactly yet how we're going to do with nurseries or Sunday school. We're going to work on that. The vestry here at St. Stephen's is going to meet tomorrow night via Zoom to talk about these. What can we put in place? How will we safeguard our people, and yet how will we find ways to worship God in community? So we're having to relearn some things that maybe our ancient forefathers already knew. How do we celebrate under new conditions and new circumstances for a while. I don't think it will be that hard. I think it will remind us of some things that maybe we have set aside. The importance of community, the importance of the spoken word, to remind us of what we've known all along, that our liturgy is a participatory event, not a spectator sport, that we're going to be involved in many ways. What are the essentials that we need? What are the things that maybe we don't need right now? And how do we adjust to that, and how do we move forward? So it's going to be rather interesting, I think. It may be a bit uncomfortable at times. It may provide more work for some people. With only 30 people being allowed to be present in a Sunday service for a while, and that includes the clergy and anybody, the organist, and extra people like that. So maybe we're only looking at 25 people in the pews. I don't know. I'm thinking that, to offset that, we might have to go from 2 services to 3 services. When Lent began and before the corona pandemic hit in its full violence, we had started doing a Wednesday service at noon here at St. Stephen's. Maybe we'll go back to that, but instead of in the chapel, we'll be up in the main church with distancing. Maybe a 3rd service on Sunday might be just for families with small children, where we're okay with the extra noise and the extra activity, but then again, how do we maintain social distancing and that sort of thing? So questions we're going to have to wrestle with and grapple with. But I think at the end of the day, what we're really looking to do is to once again come back into worshiping God in community. Once again, coming together for our communal prayers, our communal confessions, our communal support for one another, our community surrounded around the altar, being bound together by the body and blood of Christ. I think we're going to rediscover that again and what it means. I'm not sure that we haven't felt a little remorse or grief at not being able to come together. Sometimes we don't realize how much we value something until we don't have it. And so I think we're discovering how much being together on Sunday mornings in a worshiping community means to us, and how much we really miss it. I think the virtual worship services, the online worship services, the Zoom meetings, the Zoom coffee hours, all of that has been great, and it's been wonderful. We've had the opportunity to have that kind of technology to see us through this time. But at the end of the day, I still think that as Christians, we are called to be a communal people. We are called to be in the presence of each other and in the presence of Jesus. I think we find our meaning in our commonality and in our presence. I think that Christianity is a very sensual, and when I say sensual, I mean touching and feeling and being involved with all the senses of our worship, whether they're vision or taste or hearing or smelling or whatever it may be, but that involves the total human being in that process. I think we need to realize that our sacraments are very personal and intimate with each other. The signing of the cross at baptism, the giving and joining of hands and marriage, the taking of the bread and wine in the Eucharist, all these things, all these signs and symbols of God's presence among us, and that God wants to be among us. So we're looking forward to being able to come back. It will be a little slow in the beginning. It will feel a little different. We will be kind of maybe sometimes tiptoeing through this and finding our way, walking that tightrope between a good liturgy and maintaining socially responsible response to the pandemic. Our concern is for each other. We have a concern to be fed spiritually, but also to be cared for physically. And so we have to find that balance between the two. So that's what we're going to be working on here as we reopen. We're going to be discovering new ways to worship in community. We're going to be discovering new ways of doing things for a while. And they may lead us back to some of the older ways. But I think in the end, we're going to rediscover our community, what it means to be part of St. Stephen's and a part of the Episcopal Church and part of the worldwide family. They're going to discover the impact that God has in our lives and the sense of the movement of the Spirit we feel in groups sometimes. I know over in Hutchinson, there's a group of most of the churches will not reopen until the last of May on the Feast of Pentecost, and they're doing that intentionally because to celebrate the movement of the Spirit, reanimating, reinvigorating, bringing new life into the church. And I think we're going to see that across the board in places. We're going to see that as we come to celebrate once again a renewed understanding of what it means to be a member of Christ, a child of God, and an inheritor of the kingdom of heaven. What it means again to be part of this wonderful and glorious community called St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, and realizing how much we do care for one another, really do care for one another. So as we begin to reopen the doors in a couple of weeks, as we begin to tiptoe into the future, bear with us, work with us, help us to find ways to grow and expand and to move out into new things and new areas. We will get back to open the doors to anybody who wants to be here. We will get back to the beautiful music that our music program has to offer for us. We will get back to the full liturgies of the church. But until then, we still always remember the words that where two or three are gathered together in my name, I will be in the midst of them. Jesus is in our midst, always. Jesus is in our midst whether we're at home, whether we're in a small Bible study group, or whether we're in church on Sunday morning. But coming together on Sundays, coming together for communal worship, just brings a sense of spirituality that we don't necessarily get other places. So join us on the 24th. We'll let you know how we're going to do this. We're going to let you know the ins and outs of doing this. And again, we know that some people might not feel comfortable returning at that point, and that's fine too. And let us know, and we will continue to find ways to minister to you where you are at that time. So God bless you today. God keep you this week. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon in church. Have a great day.